The Library of Alexandria is remembered as humanity's great gift to open knowledge. But according to the ancient physician Galen, Ptolemy III didn't just collect books. He had ships searched at port, seized the scrolls on board, kept the originals, and handed back copies. A library built on universal access, enforced by confiscation. That contradiction, knowledge that's open but still controlled, is exactly the tension baked into modern AI. This video unpacks why that contradiction never actually goes away. Imagine every book ever written actually existed. Every fact, every discovery, every idea humans have ever recorded. Now imagine only 500 people on the entire planet could read any of it. Who would those 500 people answer to? That question isn't a hypothetical. For most of human history, it was reality. In the ancient world, literacy wasn't common. It was rare, expensive, and tightly controlled. In Mesopotamia, only a small fraction of the population could read cuneiform. In Egypt, scribal training was a professional path tied directly to the temple and the throne. This wasn't an accident. Knowledge has always been a resource, and like any valuable resource, it can be hoarded, rationed, or controlled. Whoever decides what gets recorded, translated, preserved, or destroyed effectively decides what people are allowed to know. And what people know shapes what they can question, challenge, or change. That problem never went away. It just changed shape. The scarce resource today isn't literacy. It's data, computing power, and algorithmic access. A small number of institutions now decide what gets used to train a system, what gets filtered out, and what reaches the public at all. The tools are unrecognizable. The underlying problem hasn't moved an inch. The ancient world's answer to this problem wasn't to destroy knowledge. It was to control who could reach it. Writing itself was the first checkpoint. Learning cuneiform or hieroglyphic script took years of formal training, and that training wasn't available to just anyone. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, scribes trained in temple or palace schools, and their education was funded and supervised by the very institutions they would go on to serve. By the time a scribe could read a legal contract or a royal decree, they were already bound to the people who controlled their career, their income, and their status. Loyalty wasn't an afterthought. It was built into the system before a single tablet was copied. This created a small, trusted class standing between raw information and everyone else. Kings and priests didn't need to personally read every record or approve every message. They just needed to control the scribes. Control the gatekeepers, and you control the gate. The clearest example of this system operating at scale is the Library of Alexandria, founded in Egypt in the 3rd century BCE under the Ptolemaic dynasty. It's remembered today as one of history's great monuments to open knowledge, a place that tried to collect a copy of every book in the known world. But the library wasn't a public institution in the way we imagine libraries today. Access was tightly restricted to scholars connected to the royal court, and the ancient physician Galen later described a policy attributed to Ptolemy III, in which ships arriving at the port of Alexandria were searched for scrolls. Any texts found were confiscated, copied by the library's scribes, and only the copies were returned to their original owners. Historians generally treat this account as more legend than confirmed fact, but it captures something true about how the library actually functioned. Knowledge flowed toward the palace. It didn't flow freely outward. Assyria offers a similar pattern from a different angle. King Ashurbanipal, who ruled in the 7th century BCE, built a library at Nineveh containing tens of thousands of clay tablets, covering law, medicine, astronomy, and literature. It was an extraordinary achievement of preservation. But access to that archive was governed by the same scribal class trained to serve the palace, not the general population. In every one of these cases, the mechanism was the same. Restrict who can read, train that small group to depend on the ruling power, and you don't need to censor information directly. The gate controls itself. Today, almost anyone with an internet connection can read almost anything. Literacy is no longer the bottleneck. So the old mechanism, restricting who can read, stopped working as a form of control. But the underlying problem never disappeared. It just moved to a different layer of the system. Modern information control doesn't happen at the level of reading. It happens upstream, in what gets used to build the systems we rely on, and downstream, in what those systems are allowed to say. Start upstream. Large language models, The AI systems behind tools people use every day are trained on massive collections of text pulled from the internet, books, and licensed data. But that data isn't neutral. Companies make deliberate choices about what sources to include, what to exclude, and how to weight different kinds of content. These choices are made by a relatively small number of organizations, since building a competitive AI system requires enormous computing resources that only a handful of companies and governments can afford. That scarcity of computing power functions a lot like the scarcity of literacy once did. It concentrates control in the hands of a few. Now look downstream. After a model is trained, it goes through a process often called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF. Human reviewers rate the model's responses, teaching it which answers are acceptable and which aren't. On top of that, companies apply content filters and safety policies that block certain topics, phrasings, or requests entirely. This is a real and often necessary part of building safe systems. But it also means a small team of engineers and policy writers is making decisions, every day, about what an AI will and won't tell you. Social media platforms run a parallel system. Ranking algorithms decide which posts appear in a feed and which quietly disappear into the bottom of a scroll nobody reaches. Nothing is technically censored. It's simply never shown. The information exists, the same way the tablets existed in Ashurbanipal's library. Whether it reaches you depends on a gatekeeper you usually never see. This is the modern version of the Scribal class. It isn't made up of priests or palace-trained officials. It's engineers, moderators, and policy teams, working inside companies that answer to shareholders, regulators, and public pressure. Their decisions shape what billions of people encounter every day, often without those people realizing a decision was made at all. The tools changed completely. Clay tablets became data centers. Handwritten scripts became training data. But the basic function is the same. Someone, somewhere, decides what reaches the public, and that someone answers to a structure of power most people never see. Strip away the clay tablets and the computer servers, and both systems are built on the same basic structure. Someone produces knowledge. Someone else decides how it moves. And somewhere downstream, a person receives only what made it through. That's the first principles version of what we've been looking at. Producer, gatekeeper, consumer. In ancient Mesopotamia, the producer was the scribe recording a legal ruling or a royal decree. The gatekeeper was the temple or palace that trained and employed that scribe. The consumer was everyone else, who depended entirely on what the scribe chose, or was permitted, to write down. Today, the producer is the mass of text and data generated across the internet. The gatekeeper is the company that decides what trains the model and what the model is allowed to output. The consumer is anyone typing a question into a chat window, trusting the answer they get back. Once you see that structure, the similarities stop feeling like coincidence and start feeling like a pattern with rules. The first similarity is that both systems restrict access before they touch content. Ancient rulers didn't need to edit what scribes wrote once those scribes were already trained inside institutions loyal to the throne. Modern AI companies don't need to censor every possible answer, because the training data and the reinforcement process already shape what the system is likely to say. Control the input, and you rarely need to police the output. The second similarity is dependency on a trusted, specialized class. Ancient societies depended on scribes to interpret and transmit knowledge, because almost no one else could read it directly. Modern users depend on engineers and content moderators to interpret and shape what an AI system says, because almost no one else has the technical access to intervene. In both cases, the public isn't dealing with raw information. They're dealing with someone else's interpretation of it. The third similarity is the justification offered for control. The Library of Alexandria was framed as a gift to scholarship, a monument to preserving human knowledge, even as it operated under royal restriction. Modern AI safety policies are framed as protecting users from harm, even as they concentrate significant decision-making power inside a small number of companies. The stated purpose is often genuine, but the effect is the same regardless of intention, a public good managed by a private authority. The differences matter just as much, and forcing them to match would flatten real history. Ancient information control operated at a regional scale, often limited to a single kingdom or empire. Modern systems operate globally and almost instantly, meaning a single policy decision at one company can shape what billions of people see within hours. Ancient knowledge, once lost, was often lost permanently. The burning of a library was catastrophic and, in many cases, irreversible. Digital information tends to be duplicated across countless servers, making outright destruction far harder. But it introduces a different vulnerability. Because digital systems are centralized and editable, information can be quietly adjusted, deprioritized, or removed at scale, without the dramatic visibility of a fire. And perhaps the sharpest difference is transparency. In the ancient world, everyone knew scribes and priests controlled access to knowledge. That control was visible, even expected. Today, algorithmic curation is largely invisible. Most people scrolling a feed or chatting with an AI have no clear sense that a series of deliberate decisions shaped what they're seeing. That difference points towards something bigger than either system on its own. Every time a society develops a powerful new way to produce or transmit knowledge, a controlling intermediary tends to appear almost automatically. It happened with the invention of writing. It happened again with the printing press, when England granted a legal monopoly over printing to the Stationers' Company in 1557, giving one organization the power to approve or block nearly every printed work in the country. And it's happening again now, with artificial intelligence. This isn't the result of a coordinated plan across centuries. It's a structural response. Unmanaged information threatens whoever currently holds power, and managing it requires specialized access that, by its nature, only a few people ever have. Which leads to the point underneath all of it. Information control isn't a flaw that gets fixed once and for all. It's a permanent feature of any complex society that produces valuable knowledge. The scribal class didn't disappear when literacy became common. It just moved to a new layer of the system, one built from data pipelines and content policies instead of ink and clay. The one variable that actually changes across history isn't whether a gatekeeper exists. It's whether people can see them. So the next time you ask an AI a question or scroll a feed that seems to know exactly what you want to see, remember, you're not looking at raw knowledge. You're looking at knowledge that already passed through a gatekeeper, just like every reader of Alexandria's scrolls and every citizen who couldn't read Ashurbanipal's tablets. The scribes just got a lot better at hiding. So here's what I want to know. Where do you see this pattern playing out right now? In your feed, your workplace, your favorite platform? Who's the modern scribe in your life? And do you even know their name? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and I might feature the sharpest answers in a follow-up.